and so on. So it's not just our money earning interest, it's our money and interest earning money. Interest earning interest, that's the way to win the game. Hello, and welcome to the Impact School of Money, where our mission is to change the way that people are educated about money, and this is episode 12. To go over the purposes of this quickly, one is to learn real-world rules of money. You know, there's a lot of places, a lot of books, a lot of things that you can go and get that they'll say that they're going to teach the rules of money or principles or concepts or whatever, but then you kind of question sometimes, you know, where is this information coming from? Is this someone that got a degree, that they learned from someone else that got a degree, or is this somebody that actually has practical application with human beings? You know, there's a lot of theories out there that on paper and the numbers say that it works, but the question is, have they seen it work with real human beings? Have they done an actual experiment on it? And there are a lot of books. There are several books that can be recommended and will be recommended throughout this school of books from people that actually have experience versus those that have theories. And a lot of their financial principles, if they applied them to robots, they would work, but if they applied them to human beings, they actually don't know if they would work because they've never done it. So the purpose of the Impact School of Money is to learn from financial professionals what actually works with the clients that they've worked with. Purpose number two is to learn how different products actually work, just at the very simple level, how different things work. Like today we'll be talking about interest. And then purpose three, we'll get into in future episodes, is how different products actually apply to different people in different demographics. But what we're going to talk about today in how it works. Again, this is the Impact School of Money, and this section is talking about how something in the financial industry actually works. And sometimes, you know, we hear words and we think, oh yeah, I understand how that works, but then when it's explained, it's like, oh, I didn't know how that works. And so just to review, because this is going to be something that we'll refer back to, is a rule that was found by Mr. Einstein called the Rule of 72. Okay, and the reason I'm bringing up the Rule of 72, and for those that are watching this, you know, all the way through, we're bringing it up again, but the Rule of 72 can be calculated in two different ways, whether we're earning positive interest or negative interest. You're like, what do you mean earning negative interest? Well, for example, let's just do one of the examples really quick. If the interest we're earning is 2%, then we do 2 into 72. 2 into 72 is 36. So what that means with the Rule of 72 is money doubles every 36 years. Okay, the money doubles because we're earning positive interest. Well, what if we're losing 2% per year? Or maybe it's inflation, something that's eating away at our money, either negative returns or inflation. So if 2 into 72 is 36, and that's how many years it takes money to double itself, how many years it takes it to double itself, how the inverse rule of 72 works is if it's negative interest, it's not 36 years for it to double, it's 36 years it takes for the value of the money to be cut in half. So, for example, if I was losing 2% interest in an investment that I have, in 36 years, whatever I had in there will be half. Equally, if I have $1, I have $1, in 36 years from now, if inflation is at 2%, the value of that dollar has just been cut in half. So again, the Rule of 72 is always working. The question is it working for you or is it working against you? Right? Just like going to work. Some people show up at work and are working, or they say they're working, and they're either working to grow or they're working and it's doing nothing, right? So the Rule of 72, and we might refer back to that as we go through that. But it's just something, as a base to start our conversation today in how interest works is what we're going to be focusing on today. How interest works. So there's a couple of different types of interest we hear about, and sometimes we just kind of write it off, and so we're going to talk about it today. Maybe you already know this, maybe not, and maybe it's time to learn. This was something that I didn't know 13 years ago getting into the industry, not something that I understood completely. So the first one we're going to talk about is simple interest. Okay, so simple interest versus compound interest. So simple interest, what does that mean? So we have principal. Okay, principal is going to be the amount of money that we put in, or somebody puts into an account of some kind, right? So you have your principal, and then let's say that that's $10,000. So we have $10,000 is the principal. So the principal is the amount that we put in, and then interest is the money that's added on top of the principal that we put in. And so simple and compound interest both up to that point are the same. Principal of $10,000, interest on top of it. If both a simple interest account and a compound interest account are both earning the same rate, the first year that interest is going to be exactly the same. So let's say they're both earning 10%, right? 10% on 10,000 is 1,000. So our interest would be $1,000 in both. Okay, and then it's not until the second year that we actually start seeing the difference of the compound and the simple interest. How simple interest works is it's always calculated on the principal. Compound interest is always calculated on the entire dollar amount. So, year one we get $1,000. Year two, if we get $10,000, or 10% interest, we get the same amount of interest the next year, and that's year two. And then in year three, we get the same amount if it's earning the same rate at 10%. Let's just say it is. It's a fixed account to keep it easy. It's always calculated on the original contribution. Okay? How compound interest would work is year one, we got 1,000 because it's 10% on the principal, but then the next year, year two, if we were to earn compound interest, they're calculating the 10% not on 10,000, but they're calculating the 10% on 11,000. So in that case, year two, our interest wouldn't be 1,000 again, it would be 1,100 because 10% on 11,000. And in the next year, it's 10% on 12,100, and then so on. And so if I do my math right, 10, 11, 12,100, right? And so it compounds. And so this is principal earning interest, and compound is principal and interest earning interest, and then principal plus interest earning interest, and principal plus interest earning interest. And so on. So it's not just our money earning interest, it's our money and interest earning money. Interest earning interest, that's the way to win the game. Interest earning interest, compounding on itself, where that's how the Rule of 72 is calculated, is based on compound interest, not on simple interest. If you did a calculation on how fast it takes money to double at simple interest, it would take a long time. It would take longer. For example, well, let's just do it really quick. We can do that really quick. So at 10% in our example here, at 10% growth, 10, let's do a different color. So in this example here, compound interest, 10 into 72. Why do I keep writing 2 first? I don't know. It's morning right now. Okay, 10 into 72 is 7.2. So this would double in 7.2 years. Where if we look at this, if we have 10,000 and we're adding $1,000 a year, how long does it take for that to turn into 20,000? Well, that's going to take it's going to take 10 years. So even though I didn't go to the most prestigious high school or college, I'm pretty certain that 7 is faster than 10. That my money doubling every 7 years is better than my money doubling every 10. But then here's what's interesting. 7 years later, this one has doubled again. Question, 10 years later, has this one doubled again? No. It's only gotten 50% bigger. Why? Because 10 more years, how much interest are we going to earn here? We're going to earn another $10,000 of interest. So we go from 10 to 20, and then we don't go from 20 to 40. We're not doubling like compound interest. We're just earning $10,000 again over 10 years. And then the next 10 years, we earn $10,000. And the next 10 years, we earn $10,000. And the next 10 years, we earn $10,000 again. Where in a compound interest account, we would go from $10,000 to $20,000, so it's doubled. But then we go from 20 to 40, not 30, 40 to 80, not, what would we be then? 40? And then 80 to 160, 160 to 320. And that's what's crazy is you get to age 60, let's say, in this one. You're 60 years old in the compound interest account, and let's say you have $1 million. You have $1 million in this account at age 60. We still on the board? Yes. At age 60, what if I could be patient, and of course, again, this is assuming that it does 10% per year for the next 7 years. But just to kind of be like, dang, that is cool. If I can be patient and wait till I'm now age 67, what does my $1 million do? It doubles itself, and now I have $2 million because I could be patient and wait an additional 7 years. And that is the difference between simple and compound interest. Is that a difference maker? Huge. So last two things I want to talk about. When helping people with their debt, kind of shifting gears a little bit. Now we've talked about positive interest. Now let's talk a little bit about negative interest. Okay. So negative interest, again, is going to be inflation and debt are the things working against us. You can't use the rule of 72 very well with debt because you're making payments to debt. And so if debt allowed you to not make payments, so for example, let's say it's like a reverse mortgage where you don't have to make a payment, then the rule of 72 works in the opposite fashion, is that if you have $10,000 of debt compounding at a certain interest that you're being charged, then that debt would double in a certain amount of time. I mean, is that nuts to think about? That's crazy to think about, that your debt could double, right? But just talking about debt, and you hear a lot of people say, what's the difference between smart debt and dumb debt? We get to be smart and stupid, but then they both start with S, and that wouldn't work for my example. So you have smart debt and you have dumb debt. A lot of people are like, oh, well, smart debt, that's going to be a home, and that's going to be a car, and that's going to be going to school. Wrong. All debt is dumb. You shouldn't have it. I mean, at a very basic level, just don't get into debt. But again, that's going to be, if we were all robots, yes, that makes sense. Don't get into debt. But if we didn't, we'd always be renting. We'd have like a super crappy car, especially when we're in college, right? And we wouldn't be building any equity, and we wouldn't be taking advantage of things. And sometimes you can leverage debt. It'd be best if you just didn't have any at all, but you can leverage it. There's smarter ways to handle debt, okay? But there's just smarter positions that debt can be in. So, for example, a dumb debt would be something where we're paying 29% interest. Smarter debt would be debt that we're paying 0% interest, or 1%, or 2%. That's smarter. Smart would be 0, or just none at all. But the closer we can get to 0, if we have debt, is 0%, versus 29% interest, right? So in other episodes, when we talk specifically about debt, and that'll probably be an entire month, every Tuesday, every Thursday, we'll be able to talk about debt and mortgages and credit cards and cars and all of this stuff, and we'll be able to fit it into all kinds of stuff. Okay, so 0% is going to be better than 29. But the debt that I want to talk about today is, in this section, is going to be the smart debt. Is if you have debt, if the interest you're paying could be tax deductible versus non-tax deductible, wouldn't that be smarter? Yeah, that would be a lot smarter. And so there's places where debt can be where the interest on it is a tax deduction. So let's say I'm meeting with a client. This is actually, I was meeting with a client in Texas, and they had about $30,000 of non-deductible, $30,000 in debt, and the interest rate on it, the average interest rate was 18%, non-deductible interest. So the question is, if we could just shift this here, where now any interest that we pay on that $30,000 is tax deductible, and we can lower the rate to, let's say, 6 to 8%. They're paying an actual 18% interest on their money. Here, they're paying a tax deductible 6 to 8%. Well, if they're in the 20% tax bracket, they're paying 6. What is 20% of 6 or 20% of 8? So their effective rate is less, right? Their effective rate is less. To keep it easy, let's say they were paying 5% here. They're in the 20% tax bracket. They're saving a full 1% interest that they're able to deduct. And if this is, tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands of debt that people have, having tax deductible interest on debt is, in a lot of cases, going to be better than having non-deductible. And again, it's just looking at different things and how do we make it smarter. Debt, there's never going to be a time where having debt is smarter than just not having any debt at all. And people are like, no. The numbers say that if you leverage this and do that and you buy that, and the income from it is more than the debt that you owe. Well, how about if you just didn't have any debt at all? But then again, that's very robotic. That's very disconnect the feeling from it. And I don't know about you, but I don't know very emotionless human beings. And human beings are emotional. And so when we are emotional, we want to do things that feel good, but the best balance in finance is the stuff that feels good and what the numbers say. So you have the emotion and you have the numbers, is how do I meet somewhere that it's something that I can actually feel good about, but it's also getting me ahead, and it's a balance of those things. Because if just the numbers say this is the best way to do it and you can't even sleep at night, because of how worried you are about it and how you feel about it, well, you're going to die early, and you shouldn't have done any of this debt stuff. You should have got a really big life insurance policy because you're going to die from lack of sleep and emotional, all this anxiety and stuff, right? So there's smarter places to have debt, and so we're talking again today about interest, and there's smarter ways of doing interest, and there's less smarter ways about how we handle our interest. So that is our class for today. Class dismissed.